Right now, in this exact moment, some part of you is looking for a reason to stop reading this. Maybe your thumb is already twitching toward another tab. Maybe your mind has already drifted somewhere else entirely, replaying a conversation from yesterday or planning something for later tonight. That restless, itchy feeling has a name. You call it boredom. You treat it like a flaw. Something to be fixed, medicated, scrolled away the second it appears. But the real answer is far stranger. Boredom isn't a glitch in your brain. It might be the single sharpest survival tool your ancestors ever had. And without it, you might not be here at all. Think about that for a second. Every other animal on this planet seems perfectly content to do the same thing, over and over, for its entire life. A lion sleeps 20 hours a day and feels nothing close to what you'd call restless. A crocodile can lie in the same spot for a week, unmoving, and feel no urge whatsoever to seek out something new. Even your own dog can watch the same corner of the yard for an hour without a flicker of frustration. But you can't sit still in a waiting room for 10 minutes without reaching for your phone. You can't watch a kettle boil without checking a screen. Why would evolution build a creature so deeply uncomfortable with stillness? Wouldn't stillness have been safer? Wouldn't conserving energy, staying calm, staying put, have kept your ancestors alive longer? Here's where it gets strange. Dr. Sandi Mann, a psychologist at the University of Central Lancashire, has spent years studying boredom in laboratory settings, and her research keeps landing on the same conclusion. Boredom isn't the absence of stimulation, it's a signal, a push. In one of her most cited studies, participants who were given a boring task first, like copying numbers out of a phone book, later performed significantly better on creative thinking tests than participants who skipped the boring task entirely. Mann's experiments found that bored people don't just sit and suffer in silence. They start generating ideas, daydreaming, problem solving without even realizing they're doing it. Boredom, in her data, is one of the most reliable triggers for creative thinking that psychologists have ever measured. That sounds backwards, doesn't it? The feeling you hate the most, the one you'd pay good money to avoid, might be the one doing you the most good. Now rewind. Not years, not centuries. Rewind hundreds of thousands of years to a small band of early humans moving across the African savanna. Life for them was not the constant, breathless danger you might picture from a documentary. Contrary to what feels intuitive, most hours of most days were not spent fighting off predators or sprinting after prey. Anthropologists who study modern hunter-gatherer groups have found that subsistence tasks, hunting, gathering, tool repair, often took up far fewer hours per day than a typical modern work schedule. Most hours were spent doing very little at all. Walking, waiting, watching the horizon for anything to change. Long stretches of nothing, punctuated by short bursts of everything. And that's exactly the problem evolution had to solve. An animal that stays still, content, fully satisfied with exactly what it already has, doesn't go looking for anything new. It doesn't climb the ridge to see what's on the other side. It doesn't test whether that unfamiliar plant with the strange purple leaves is edible. It doesn't wonder what's making that faint rustling sound just past the tree line. A perfectly satisfied creature stays exactly where it is, doing exactly what it has always done. And a creature that stays exactly where it is, when the climate shifts, when the herds move on, when the water dries up, dies exactly where it is too. Boredom broke that trap. It had to. Anthropologist Peter Gray, who has spent decades studying hunter-gatherer societies across multiple continents, has argued that human childhood itself evolved to be unusually long and unusually playful specifically because restlessness drives exploration, and exploration drives learning. Gray's research on groups like the Jugyo-Hoense of southern Africa points to something remarkable. Children in these societies are rarely bored in the way you might expect because their environment gives their restlessness somewhere real to go. They invent games out of sticks and stones. They test social rules against each other, again and again, until they understand exactly where the boundaries lie. They wander further from camp than any adult would explicitly ask them to. Every single one of those small, seemingly pointless acts was practiced for something much bigger surviving in a world that never stayed the same for long. You inherited that exact restlessness, every uncomfortable ounce of it. Picture an early human sitting at the edge of camp as the light fades. The hunting is done for the day. The fire is built and crackling. There is nothing urgent left to do, nothing left that needs immediate attention. And yet something in that person's mind refuses to let the moment simply rest. It nags, it pushes. It starts asking questions that don't need answers yet, questions with no practical use in this exact second. What's past that tree line to the west? What happens if these two stones are struck together at a different angle? What if, tomorrow, the group follows the river instead of the usual path through the grass? None of those questions were necessary for survival that particular day. But over 10,000 generations, repeated across thousands of small bands scattered over an entire continent, the humans who asked them anyway ended up mapping new territory nobody else had seen. They discovered new food sources hiding just beyond the familiar range. They stumbled into new tools and new techniques simply because they couldn't leave well enough alone. Meanwhile, the humans who felt genuinely, fully content to do nothing new, generation after generation, quietly got left behind by a world that kept shifting underneath them. Consider what this means for something as ordinary as fire. Nobody needed fire until suddenly everybody needed fire. Before it existed, there was no gap in daily survival that fire was filling. The nights were simply dark, the way they had always been, the way every previous generation had accepted without question. But somewhere, at some point, an early human sat by two pieces of wood, restless, with nothing urgent to do, and struck them together simply because sitting there doing absolutely nothing had become unbearable. Archaeological evidence suggests controlled fire use stretches back at least 1 million years, long before humans had any pressing, immediate need for it beyond simple curiosity and discomfort with idleness. The single greatest technology in human history may have started as nothing more than a bored person's fidgeting. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Boredom isn't a design flaw sitting inside an otherwise perfect machine. It's a pressure valve built by millions of years of trial and error, whose entire job is to make absolutely sure you never stay still for too long. Neuroscientist John Eastwood at York University describes boredom as the uncomfortable feeling of wanting to be engaged in a satisfying activity, but being unable to find one. Notice exactly what that definition implies. Boredom doesn't just mean nothing is currently happening around you. It means your brain is actively, insistently demanding that something happen. It's not passive emptiness, the way a blank wall is empty. It's an alarm wired directly into your motivation system. And alarms exist for exactly one reason: to make you move. Here's where the twist gets even stranger, and even more relevant to the life you're actually living right now. If boredom evolved specifically as a survival pressure, then feeling bored was never supposed to feel pleasant. It was supposed to feel bad enough, uncomfortable enough, that you'd do almost anything to escape it. That's precisely what modern neuroscience finds when researchers look inside the skull. Studies using functional brain imaging show that the discomfort of prolonged boredom activates regions of the brain associated with physical pain processing, not a metaphorical ache, an overlapping neural signature with real pain. Your brain treats prolonged idleness the way it treats a low, constant physical discomfort, because for nearly the entire span of human history, idleness that lasted too long really was dangerous. A mind that didn't push itself to act eventually belonged to a body that didn't survive. There's an experiment that captures this almost perfectly. Researchers at the University of Virginia, led by psychologist Timothy Wilson, once placed volunteers alone in a bare room for around 15 minutes with absolutely nothing to do except think. No phone, no book, no task. The only other option available to them was a device that delivered a mild electric shock, something every single participant had already said beforehand they would pay money to avoid. And yet, left alone with their own thoughts for just a quarter of an hour, a striking number of participants, men especially, chose to shock themselves rather than sit quietly with nothing happening. Wilson's conclusion was blunt. For many people, doing something, even something unpleasant, feels better than doing nothing at all. That isn't weakness. That's an ancient alarm doing exactly what it was built to do, which raises an uncomfortable question about the world you're actually living in right now. For most of the last few 100,000 years, boredom had exactly one available outlet: action in the physical world. Walk somewhere new. Try something you haven't tried. Make something with your hands. Talk to another person face to face. The itch and its solution were connected by real effort, real risk, and real reward. A bored ancestor who acted on that restlessness might discover a better hunting ground, a useful new plant, or an ally in a neighboring group. But somewhere in just the last 2 decades, a blink of an eye on any evolutionary timescale, that connection got severed almost completely. Now the itch of boredom can be answered in under 1 second, with a flick of a thumb, without a single ounce of exploration, effort, or risk involved. That should sound like a solution to an ancient problem. It might actually be closer to a trap disguised as one. Psychologist Dr. Mary Helen Amardino Yang, who studies the neuroscience of emotion and thought at the University of Southern California, has pointed out that periods of so-called idle time are actually when the brain's default mode network activates most strongly, a network directly tied to reflection, imagination, moral reasoning, and long-term planning. In other words, the moments when you feel most bored, most restless, most desperate for a distraction, are often precisely the moments your brain is doing its deepest, most important background work. This is when memories get consolidated, when unrelated ideas quietly connect into new ones, when you figure out what you actually want, rather than what's simply in front of you. Every single time that boredom gets instantly short, circuited by a bright screen, that background work gets interrupted before it has any real chance to finish. Think about how often that interruption happens in a single day. The average person checks their phone dozens of times before lunch. Each check is small. Each one feels harmless. But each one is also a tiny act of cutting off the exact process your brain evolved to run whenever things go quiet. It's the equivalent of an early human, restless at the edge of camp, finally standing up to walk toward the tree line, and then 1 second later, sitting right back down before taking a single step. The urge fires. The action never completes. Multiply that by dozens of times a day, thousands of times a year, and an entire lifetime of unfinished ancient impulses starts to add up to something that feels a lot like exhaustion without ever really moving. Your ancestors' boredom pushed them outward, into the unknown, toward genuine discovery, toward the next ridge and the next river and the next invention. Your boredom today mostly gets absorbed instantly by a feed engineered specifically to swallow it whole before it can push you toward anything at all. The itch fires exactly the way it always has. But the outlet, the one your entire nervous system evolved to expect, has been quietly replaced with something that looks like relief and behaves like a dead end. So think again, seriously, about that restless, itchy feeling you get. The one you've spent your entire life trying to make disappear as quickly as possible. It's not broken. It's ancient. It's the exact same internal alarm that once pushed a small band of humans past the next ridge, toward a river they hadn't seen before, toward a tool they hadn't yet imagined, toward a world they hadn't yet mapped or named. It doesn't want you comfortable. It never once wanted that. It wants you moving, curious, searching, testing, because for most of human history, standing still for too long, both physically and mentally, was the single most dangerous thing a person could do. The question was never really why you get bored so easily. The real question is what happens the next time that feeling shows up in your chest or behind your eyes, and whether you'll let it do the ancient job it was built to do, or reach for your phone before it even gets the chance to start